Permanent Representative and Consul General, laid on the table of the House on Thursday, 16th January 2025, and pursuant to the provisions of Article 132(2)(e) of the Constitution, Section 22 of the Foreign Services Act, Cap 185(e), and Section 3 and 8 of the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approval Act, Cap 7F, this House approves the appointment of the following persons as indicated. Dr. Andrew Karanja, Ambassador, Brasilia, Brazil. Honorable AJAABU Namwamba, AGH, Permanent Representative of Kenya to the United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, and United Nations Office at Nairobi, UNON. And Mr. Noor Yarok Gabo, CBS, as Consul General, Port-au-Prince, Haiti. Yes, JUNET.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, this is a very important issue. And that's the reason why we have nowadays ambassadors getting approved through the House. Before, it never used to be there. It used to be the President appoints and they go to work. So we must have our views, because all of us are not members of the Foreign and Defense Relations Committee. We are waiting for the committee to present their report here so that we can give our views and opinions on it, Mr. Speaker. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, I stand to support this motion, but with a very heavy heart. Mr. Speaker, as a former foreign minister, and you know that area very well, and you're a diplomat, Mr. Speaker, the Foreign Service is not a dumping site. If you have served as a cabinet secretary and you have been dismissed due to incompetence, due to negligence, due to all kind of manner of accusations, and then you are appointed as an ambassador, Mr. Speaker, what is this knowledge that you could not use to run a ministry, that you are going to run a department, you are going to run a foreign embassy, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, once you have been dismissed summarily, the way some of these characters I'm seeing on this paper, on this motion have been dismissed, they should go and look for other things to do. You can do farming, you can do other engagements in the country. It's not compulsory for you to be given a job, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let us emulate other developed democracies, where if somebody is relieved of his duty, he has other things to do. You need to have other professions. If you have a doctor, go and treat people. If you're a lawyer, go and do your other work.
Yes, Honorable JUNET, there is a point of order from member for Kinango. Yes, Kwenya.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is sad that the leader of minority is misleading this House. The cabinet secretary, the former cabinet secretary is speaking about or talking about, was not actually fired because of incompetence, because the president did not state any reason, and it is unfair for the leader of minority to continue misleading this House. That indeed the person who he is purporting to have been fired was fired for incompetence. In fact, he stated in the interview that he would serve in any capacity. I do not have, actually, he has insinuated. His insinuation is enough for us to know who he is talking about.
Two of these nominees, Kwenya, are former cabinet ministers. So which one are you defending?
Mr. Speaker.
Both number one and number two.
Yes. Both number one and two, Mr. Speaker, none was fired because of incompetence. And we took them through a rigorous process where we were vetting them, and they are equal to the task. And indeed, they said that they can be assigned any role by the president.
Honorable Kwenya, to the extent that the appointing and firing authority gave no reasons, it is left to anybody's conjecture. So, JUNET is not out of order. But Honorable JUNET, take your seat. Honorable members, today is a special sitting, and we have three motions to deal with. At order number 10, order number 11, order number 12. Before we go to 13 and 14, I want to propose to you to agree that orders number 10, 11, and 12 were assigned them an average of an hour each. If you want to truncate the time, so much the better. I will watch the trend of contributions. If it's repetitive and tautologous, I will invite the mover to reply. If there are different views, I'll be happy to hear them. So, JUNET, go on. Is that agreed by the House? Yeah, go on, JUNET. Yes, Kainan? Pardon? You will contribute if you catch the Speaker's eye. Go on.
Mr. Speaker, I am happy that you protected me from the wrath of Honorable Kwenya, because maybe one of the nominees is from his village who has been dismissed, Mr. Speaker, and now who's seeking a job through ambassadorial appointment. But Mr. Speaker, this is I think the House should look into this matter in the next appointment. Mr. Speaker, why should you be appointed, if you are a cabinet secretary and you are reassigned to become an ambassador, then that's fine. It's a matter of fact that you've been relieved of your duties. Especially, I'm sure the one Kwenya is alluding to is a cabinet secretary who served for barely 3 months. Why should you be relieved of your duties of barely 3 months if it's not out of incompetence? What else can it be? If it's on health ground, then you should not go to another job. You should go back and stay at home. Mr. Speaker, why am I saying so? Because I want competent Kenyans who are career diplomats to get space so they can serve this country at the level of the apex of ambassadorial work, Mr. Speaker, which is an ambassador, as has been said by the chairman of the committee himself, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, foreign service is a calling. It's a very important job, Mr. Speaker. It's not a job that can be done by anyone, Mr. Speaker. It is a job that requires certain skills, Mr. Speaker. And you have nurtured many people when you are the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Mr. Speaker. One of the things I admire about the Speaker is his diplomatic credentials, Mr. Speaker. I'm being honest. Because we have fought here many times, and you tell me even in our mother tongue, it's dodgy, it's dodgy, it's dodgy. Calm down, man, calm down. Mr. Speaker, it's dodgy, quote in quote. So, Mr. Speaker, this is a job that requires special skills. What skills is that you could not run a ministry that now you have acquired within the last 2 weeks so that you can go and deal with it in those foreign embassies, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, this process must be taken seriously. Secondly, and most importantly, when somebody is being given a job of ambassador, please, I'm asking the executive they should do a due diligence. You cannot give somebody a job, and when he's told to appear before the committee is when she says, no, I'm not interested in this job. There are many Kenyans who want that job. Surely. Why should you be guessing whether this person wants the job or not? A former cabinet secretary was proposed to Parliament for vetting as an ambassador for which country? Ghana, Mr. Speaker. This is the second time people are declining to go to Ghana. Initially, a former member of Parliament declined. Now the former cabinet secretary again declined. Why should we be begging people with jobs when there are many Kenyans who are jobless, who have the requisite qualification to go and serve this country in Ghana? And you know, in Ghana, that is where the headquarters now of the African Free Trade offices are. We need a very important person there, not jokers who don't want jobs, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, if under this, maybe this now, you know, we are the ones now who are sending experts to government. So if there are no experts on this other side, let them tell us, we shall give them experts to go to Ghana, Mr. Speaker, under the broad-based arrangement, Mr. Speaker. We have experts who can go and work in Ghana. If you give me 10 minutes now, I'll produce one. Under this exchange program of experts. It's an exchange program under broad-based.
David, Speaker.
Honorable Speaker, just on a point of information for Honorable JUNET, I think it's important for you to find out first what the challenges were for Honorable Margaret Nyambura not to be able to take up the position. I think she did confirm that they shared certain family challenges, that prevented her from being able to leave the country and preferred to have a job within the country. So I think you need to find out what were the issues before you castigate her or castigate the station. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker,
yes.
I think the Deputy Speaker did not hear me well. Mr. Speaker, these jobs when you are being offered, even you now, if you are to send me to a mission on behalf of Parliament to London, first you'll ask me, are you available from this date to that date? Before you bring somebody's name to Parliament. Parliament is a serious place. Before you send a name to National Assembly for approval and vetting, you must ask that individual whether he or she are interested in that job. At that level there. Not when she comes here, or the name is brought here, I tell you, oh, you see, I want to do farming, I have a big farm in Migori, I want to do sugar cane. That is afterthought. Before you give me an opportunity to serve, ask me whether I'm interested in this job, because it's not the first time, it's not the second time. I don't want it to happen again, Mr. Speaker. I want this time Kenyans who are sure, Kenyans who are willing to serve the country to be given an opportunity. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, I support the motion because some of the members also whom I see there can do, let's give them a second chance now. Let's give them a second chance. We see how they perform. Because the first chance failed, Mr. Speaker. Now let us see, let's give them a second chance. We see how they perform, how they do, how they will serve the country. Mr. Speaker, with those few remarks, I support.
Mother Wangari.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also agree with Honorable JUNET that we give them a second chance, because sometimes you'll have a member who will be here, not do very well as an MP, but when become a senator or a governor, they do exemplary job. And because they had not been dismissed on grounds of being ineffective or having done any issue that was against the Constitution, that we give them the chance and allow the appointing authority to do as he wishes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I sat in this vetting process, and it has come at the right time when we are reviewing our foreign policy as a country to be able to align to the shifting global dynamics, Mr. Speaker, and to be able to align to our national interests, Mr. Speaker. And that is why these appointments are very, very crucial. Mr. Speaker, the issue of Dr. Karanja, a very, very well-published and renowned academic, Mr. Speaker, has a very wide experience, Mr. Speaker, and it has also come at the right time when we are expecting to hold the Conference of Parties, or what you call COP30, in Belém, Brazil, this year in November, Mr. Speaker. So we are hoping that he will be able to help us also navigate as we send our team to be able to negotiate and make progress for our country. Mr. Speaker, the other thing we were able to raise to Dr. Karanja is specifically of the missions or ambassadorial missions becoming the first stop of our Kenyans who are outside the country, especially students, when they are stranded, when we have issues in other countries. These ambassadors must be reachable, must be accessible, and must be responsive to our citizens outside the country, Mr. Speaker. These ambassadors, permanent rep, and consul generals, Mr. Speaker, are the image that we are projecting of the country and of the president in the outside world. Mr. Speaker, I also agree with the previous speakers in terms of at the time when we get a person declining an appointment, Mr. Speaker, it definitely sends a very bad picture to have Accra becoming rejected twice, Mr. Speaker. So it is important that, as has been said by the mover, that the head of public service does proper consultation with the appointing authority to ensure that if someone is not ready to take up an appointment, you reject it at the right time. Let it not go to the Gazette notice, because when it goes to the Gazette notice, even if you write to the clerk, it will already have gone out, Mr. Speaker. So the timing is very critical that we have it checked. Mr. Speaker, the issue of linking the country with our country is very important. It has become a global village. We hope that these three appointees will do a good job. I want to also pick up on AJAABU Namwamba, a person who has served in this house for 10 years, has been a cast, Mr. Speaker, and we were able to interrogate in terms of his knowledge, in terms of representing us in the UNEP and UNON. And one issue, Mr. Speaker, that I personally feel about UNEP and UNON is that despite being hosted in this country, if you go to Switzerland, if you go to New York, you will see the linkage between the national and domestic interests with the offices of the UN that are located in those areas, Mr. Speaker. I feel like Gigiri in UNEP and UNON, they feel detached from what we are doing as a country. So I would hope, as he promised, that he will be able to act as a bridge between getting the bottom-up economic transformation agenda, the national interest of this country linked into these offices, Mr. Speaker. Let Kenyans also feel them as part of the global world. Mr. Speaker, the issue of Haiti is very critical. The person who has been nominated there, who is Gabo, Mr. Speaker, has been in the police for over 30 years, ended up as the DIG, has been in the policy implementation at that level, Mr. Speaker. And the one question we hope and we actually put up to him is that as we already sent our first contingent of police officers to help restore peace in Haiti, we will be looking that he'll be the go-between for those officers, because first of all, for obvious reasons, the officers are not unionized, Mr. Speaker. It would be very unfair or unfortunate for our issues, especially of welfare of those officers, to go to the media. We see them on BBC, we see them in other areas, complaining that their welfare is not being taken care of, Mr. Speaker. So we'll be hoping that when Gabo reports, if appointed and if passed in this House, Mr. Speaker, he will be able to do a good job to ensure that he's the go-between between these officers and of course other Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, who are in that area, who would actually be threatened by any issue or who would be having an issue of welfare. They would wish to communicate so that they're able to sort it out in-house before it gets out, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that being said, I hope that we can also as a country be able to develop a foreign policy, as it is being done now but through the ministry, that is based on fundamental principles of peaceful coexistence, so that we can be able to preserve our national security and also have peaceful coexistence in the global world and where we sit. With that, Mr. Speaker, I support. Thank you.
Ole Sunguli.
Mr. Speaker, I will stand to support these appointments. Being appointed to be ambassador, as you did appoint me when to go to China, is one of the biggest, one of the most important jobs that you can get as a country. Actually, it's the only time you can be called Your Excellency without being elected. And that shows you the importance that is attached to this particular office. Mr. Speaker, I concur with the committee, except when I listen to the chairman of the committee describing, for instance, Dr. Andrew Karanja, and I listened to our friend Mother from Gilgil saying that he's well-educated, but the chairman says that we appointed him notwithstanding the fact that he cannot communicate very well. Now, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, of course the duty of an ambassador is to communicate, to speak for the country. I find one thing that is being omitted all the time, that ambassadors are being vetted or appointed. It does not happen in Western countries, that you are appointed to a Portuguese-speaking country and you can't speak Portuguese. You are appointed to a French-speaking country and you can't speak French. Now, if Dr. Karanja does not communicate well in English, what do you think about him communicating well in Portuguese? I think we're like Honorable JUNET is saying.
Order, Julius. There's a point of order from Wangari.
Mr. Speaker, I don't remember anyone saying that Dr. Karanja cannot communicate effectively in English, because he's actually a graduate of a PhD holder, Mr. Speaker, and was very fluent and very well conversed with the English language. The only issue we had was the issue of speaking in Portuguese, and we've had others who have gone, including yourself, without speaking the local language.
Yes, JUNET.
Mr. Speaker, of course.
Hold on, Sunguli. Yes.
Mr. Speaker, I want to also say that having a PhD does not mean that you know English. You can be having a PhD and you don't know English, because you saw the other day in Eldoret, there was a university that gave honorary degrees of PhDs and people were in goals. How do you know those people speak English? How can you confirm that those members speak English? But it's not.
Order, members. Honorable Sunguli. I appointed you to China without you knowing any Chinese language.
So, Mr. Speaker, that is why, with the benefit of the hindsight, I'm able to advise that it becomes a problem. But I took an immediate measure and learned Chinese.
Yes.
And Mr. Speaker, you can also attest that when you came to China, I was able to translate some Chinese to you.
Yes,
I'm just saying that in future, as we draft this policy, let us take that into consideration so that we can appoint people who are fit for purpose. And when I talk about lack of communication, I was referring to the speech of the chairman of the committee that Dr. Karanja said that he is going to improve his communication skills once he gets back to Brazil. Mr. Speaker, I also want to commend His Excellency the President for appointing Mr. Nur Gabo to be Consul General.
Yes, Bashir, what's the point of order?
Motion, sir. Honorable Speaker, I want to...
Sungule, do you want to be informed?
You know,
I want to...
Yes, you can let him inform.
Go ahead.
Honorable Speaker, I just want to inform Honorable Sungule and the House that the point where our chairman said that the nominee said he's going to improve on his communication skills was not particular on the speech, but it was, we asked him a question on why, when he was the Minister for Agriculture, that he kept quiet when so many things were happening, including the issue of vaccination. And he said there was a lapse and that in future he's going to improve on his communication skills to the public and the people he serves. Thank you.
Yeah, that's why I said he was appointed in spite of that fact. But Mr. Speaker, I was at the point of saying that I wish to thank His Excellency the President for appointing Mr. Nur Gabo to be Consul General to the Port-au-Prince in Haiti. That, like Brazil is the only place where we have our embassy in South America. And I hope that this position that Mr. Nur Gabo has been appointed to becomes a position where he's ambassador to the Caribbean, rather than just a Consul General to Haiti. But it is a testament, Mr. Speaker, of the fact that the mission in Haiti is actually now getting some fruits. Contrary to what we had predicted here in this house, it seems like the brave sons of Kenya are at long last making a difference in Haiti. And I hope that Mr. Gabo will, if his presence in Haiti, in presence in the Port-au-Prince, will in fact now enhance our responsibilities in that place. And it is very important that we eventually take this office away from Haiti to in fact Kingston itself, so that the rest of the Caribbean can come under the loop of Kenya, because we need the Caribbean countries when it comes to our diplomacy. We have our foot in South America. We need to extend that to Santiago in Chile. We have our foot now in Port-au-Prince. We need to extend that again to the rest of the Caribbean. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that the ambassadors in abroad ought to be looked after very well. I don't know the position currently, but when I last visited one country, it looked like the salaries were delaying, some of the allowances were delayed, and it is very embarrassing if the embassy abroad does not get its payments due on time. Mr. Speaker, I support.
Thank you. Mutunga.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to the adoption of the committee report on the appointments. Honorable Speaker, I have worked with and I know Dr. Karanja very well. Honorable Speaker, Dr. Karanja worked and retired from the World Bank. And the World Bank is not any mean hirer. The World Bank hires the best. So it's about the best brains that we have in this country. Honorable Speaker, we have had issues in the ministry. And probably the question may have tilted this response.
Yes, Kainan, what's the problem? I see an officer in mechanical gear. trying to fix. In the event I give you a chance to speak and it's not working, you'll get a portable mic. Go on, Mutunga.
Yeah, Honourable Speaker, I'm saying that we've had a few issues in the sector, especially the issue on vaccination, which needed to be properly delivered to the Kenyans. It could have been anybody here and any basic speaker in this house or in this country. But Honourable Speaker, those are issues that are technical in nature and require the competent authority to respond. And the competent authority on this matter is the Director of Veterinary Services. So maybe we should be asking ourselves the extent to which the Director of Veterinary Services came out and gave out the issues, responded to the issues of vaccination. Honourable Speaker, I would like to thank the President for realizing it necessary to put Dr. Karanja specifically in Brazil. Honourable Speaker, Brazil is the hub of agriculture in the Southern American region, and it influences the entire world in terms of the agricultural products because they sell a lot to most parts of the world. In fact, they access more markets than we possibly could. They are much more advanced in research, in research on various types of products, and we can gain a lot in terms of opening up doors for Kenyans and opening up doors for technology transfer from Brazil to Kenya. So, having an agricultural background and being in a place where you will be able to identify what is good and useful for us, I believe Dr. Karanja will really will do a good job to help Kenyans out. Honourable Speaker, I want to very briefly speak about the appointment of the Consul General, Mr. Noah Yero Gubao. Honourable Speaker, I remember very well in this house, we had a heated debate on why should we send Kenyans to die in Haiti. Up to now, Honourable Speaker, I have not been able to find any situation where a Kenyan has died in Haiti. In any case, Kenyans are being commended for the good work that they are doing. And this is an outgrowth of that particular opening or that particular relationship that we created with Haiti. So, Honourable Speaker, I would like to appeal to our colleagues that sometimes we need to be objective in whatever we say so that we may also open up doors and avenues for Kenyans. Those Kenyans who are in Haiti are Kenyans who are earning a living, maybe even an extra coin out of such engagement which are of international nature. Honourable Speaker, very briefly about our UNEP appointment. Honourable Speaker, this UNEP appointment is in Nairobi. United Nations Environmental Program is based here in Nairobi, and we believe and strongly believes that the appointment of AJAABU Namwamba, Honorable, is going to help us to especially dig into the environmental issues in this country and relate what we are doing in terms of policies, in terms of legal and the regulatory instruments of this country with what is happening at the UN. It will help us also to improve our sitting or our statement that we make at the international negotiation tables, and I believe that he will also take time to identify what other countries do so they are so impactful when it comes to the outcomes of negotiations. In most of the cases, Honourable Speaker, we do not take the right people to the negotiating table. Sometimes we pick institutions, and these institutions may not have the correct personnel to go to the negotiations. And I would like to appeal to the Honourable AJAABU Namwamba, once he takes this particular position, to look at the issue of negotiations, at the determinations of what are our proposals to the various issues that are under the table when it comes to the United Nations Framework Conventions on climate change, especially, and when the conference of parties are meeting. Honourable Speaker, with those few remarks, I support the adoption of this report.
Kainan. There's one behind you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to contribute to this very important report. Mr. Speaker, diplomacy, by definition, is the art, science, and other means states use to interact with other nations to safeguard their national interest. Mr. Speaker, that being the case, in the modern day diplomacy, Mr. Speaker, was born out of the Vienna Convention of 1961, which also provided the basis for diplomatic engagement as to promote, to project, and to protect the interests of that particular country. Mr. Speaker, I'm aware that it was during your time as the Minister for Foreign Affairs, and later on when Amina took over, that for the first time, we have adopted a written foreign policy which provides 5 pillars as the basis for our diplomatic engagement. Mr. Speaker, number 1 is peace diplomacy. 2 is economic diplomacy. 3 is diaspora diplomacy. 4 is environmental diplomacy. And 5 is cultural diplomacy. Mr. Speaker, these being the basis of our foreign diplomatic pillars, then what is it that an individual is supposed to have? This particular field is a specialized field. Mr. Speaker, I know individuals have alluded to this. When you are appointed, the first thing is you are expected to be the interface between Kenya and the country that you have been assigned to represent Kenya. There are basic things that, other than the educational qualifications, there are basic things that sometimes we fail to appreciate. Mr. Speaker, in the past, before the collapse, before the end of the Soviet Union, Mr. Speaker, diplomats used to be appointed purely on ideological persuasions. But today things have changed. Things have changed because first thing in our engagement is diplomatic economic diplomacy. Mr. Speaker, as much as these 3 individuals are qualified, and I do know their first objective will be to pursue track 1 diplomacy, meaning state-to-state relations. But there are other things that they are also expected to do through track 2 diplomacy, which is non-state actors' role in our diplomatic engagement, in particular the UN. The Honorable AJAABU Namwamba, as a former minister, as a former parliamentarian, I must say is one of the most qualified individuals to represent Kenya, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, being appointed or being assigned to represent Kenya at the UN habitat, Mr. Speaker, this entity is the only one of its kind south of Sahara. But the role has been completely dispersed. The functions of this entity called JUNET that is supposed to be here has been dispersed to Spain, Portugal, and other countries. Mr. Speaker, recently, some few months ago, Kenya was given the status of being the only non-NATO allied member south of Sahara and the 4th in Africa, Mr. Speaker. This is not a mean achievement. Mr. Speaker, this comes with pride and prestige. And therefore, the individuals who are appointed to this position, first of all, must be educationally qualified, must be individually spirited and ready to represent Kenya in all aspects, in all the international assignments. And therefore, the question is, Mr. Speaker, and this is why I agree with the chairman of Defense and Foreign Relations, before individuals are assigned or nominated to these positions, there must be some engagement so that the presidential appointments are very lucrative and very appointment, so that individuals don't turn down these offers at the last minute. And therefore, in future, and I agree with the chairman, before some of these individuals are nominated or assigned, they must have some informal interaction. And this is what the chairman actually has alluded to, Mr. Speaker. And this is the right thing to do, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know you are a product of this. Mr. Speaker, this being the case, these appointments are coming at a time when the global village, when Kenya is being challenged economically, politically. There are so many issues that these diplomats have to be prepared. And I want to agree with what Honorable Sunkuli has said. Linguistic preparedness is very important. When you are assigned, you are an intelligence officer, you are an economic representative, you are political. Therefore, knowing the language of that community where you are expected to serve is a very important thing. And therefore, I want to ask the chairman defense and the other member, in future, there must be some linguistic preparedness for some of these individuals. So that if you are posted to a Portuguese-speaking country, you must have the basics. If you are going to be posted to China, you must also have the basics. Otherwise, you will waste your first 2 years in getting ready, and that will be a waste. And by then, the times have changed. Your tour of duty has almost come to an end, and you will have done nothing. And I think that's a very important suggestion. Not that we are not happy with the appointing authority, but it is a way to assist so that the individual becomes productive as soon as you take that particular role. Mr. Speaker, this being the case, today the world is going through a serious crisis. The Middle East crisis, the Ukraine and the Russian crisis, Mr. Speaker, and the change of regime in the US, Mr. Speaker, this is the high time that Kenyans who are appointed to these positions must be individuals who can meet the test of time, individuals who are prepared, individuals who have the skills, individuals who have the interests of this country at heart, and individuals who are willing to go out of their way to promote this premier nation, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in the past, you are aware, some of these postings used to be a dumping ground. You fail in all other things. And Mr. Speaker, I want to attest to one thing, that parliamentarians or politicians remain the best all-round ambassadors this country has ever had. And you are witness, you know it. Because the fact that you are a politician doesn't mean, and I want to agree, I want to disagree with those who say it. Some of these individuals, like AJAABU, MOHAMMED, and many others, who have been politicians, and I can tell you, will remain the best ambassadors this country has ever had. So let's support our colleagues. To be a former politician is not a curse. To be a former minister is not a curse. But you must be prepared for the job. That's why consultation is also very important. And Mr. Speaker, I know you are also a seasoned product of this particular ministry. One of the things that we should be encouraging, Mr. Speaker, is because we have opened so many missions. Are these missions contributing to the economic well-being of the Republic of Kenya, or they have just expanded our political engagement? As chairman and colleagues, as the former chair of this committee, is one of the things that you need to go around and find out what is the economic contribution of some of these missions that we have opened. If it is through political persuasion, I think you need to close them as soon as possible. If they are adding well-being, if they are going to add value to the economic growth, to the economic well-being, then we need to open, we need to look everywhere. East, west, north, south. And that's our diplomatic engagement. And that's one of the things that proudly we have entrenched over the years. And finally, Mr. Speaker, this appointment comes at a time also when some of the role, there's a lot of debate in Mr. Speaker. The debate is, what is going to be the position of Kenya? Are we going to join the League of Developing Nations, or are we going to be competing with ourselves? Over the years, we have been competing with ourselves. Today, Mr. Speaker, you are witness. Just reflect on the GDP of Ethiopia. It's almost twice that of Kenya. Few years ago, Ethiopia was a struggling economy. Mr. Speaker, look at Uganda. Few years ago, Uganda was dependent on Kenya. Today, they are not our favorite trading partner. Look at Tanzania. What happens to Kenya? We have all become, we have all reduced ourselves to an inward-looking nation. An internal debate that will not put food, water, and other amenities on the table. We need to think outside. What happens outside? We need to create opportunities, because many youths in the field are either unemployed or underemployed. And many are in the field and they're looking upon this leadership here to give them opportunities. These opportunities will not come if we become a state that politics from morning to evening, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, with this, I want to urge my colleagues to support this, and I also want to urge the President to appoint more politicians to these very important diplomatic engagements. I support these appointments. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The 1 hour is over. Mover.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Thank you very much, honorable colleagues, for your contribution. They are very enriching. If you noticed, Honorable Speaker, I did not interrupt most of the comments from honorable members, because it makes our committee even more better, enriching us with thoughts that we will reflect with the product that we'll be bringing to the House.